call the fourth meeting of the Committee of the Whole of the 14th session of the Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification to order. Distinguished delegates, I now invite the committee to resume its consideration of Agenda Item 2, entitled 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, Implications for the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, in order to take up Sub-Item C, Implementation of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, Communication Plan and the United Nations Decade for Deserts and the Fight Against Desertification, 2010-2020. Under this sub-item, the committee has before it the following document: UNCCDCOP14/4. I give the floor to the representative of the UNCCD Secretariat, Ms. Yuki Hori, to introduce this report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished delegates, good afternoon. Following the guidance by Decision 4/COP13, the Secretariat developed the new UNCCD communication plan based on internal and external consultations. Its objectives are set first to provide guidance for UNCCD stakeholders on the use of communication tools to help achieve their goals set under the strategy. Second, to strengthen the corporate communication function of the UNCCD Secretariat and the global mechanism. And third, to effectively reach target groups on the priority issues under the strategy through consistent and coordinated messages across different communication platforms. During this reporting period, the Secretariat made efforts to enhance the effectiveness of media outreach as guided by Decision 4/COP13. Partnerships with media helped balance language diversity and geographic outreach. The UNCCD website and social media show constant increase in visitors and outreach as well. The Land for Life program engaged in a variety of awareness-raising and knowledge support activities on the importance of achieving LDN and the benefits of implementing SLM practices. Last year, the World Day to Combat Desertification was observed under the slogan, "Land has true value, invest in it." The global observance was held in Ciudad Mitad del Mundo, hosted by the government of Ecuador. This year is the 25th anniversary of the UNCCD. The anniversary was celebrated along with the global observance of the World Day to Combat Desertification in Ankara, hosted by the government of Turkey. Close to 3,000 participated in the observance event. We thank Ecuador and Turkey for their wonderful organizations of these observance events. For the next biennium, communication activities will focus on raising the profile of sustainable land management as an indicative solution to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It will be implemented by promoting consistent and coordinated messages at international forums and through national, regional, and global media channels, increasing the production of communication contents to improve social media engagement, raising the visibility of desertification, land degradation, and drought in the global media, and finally, mobilizing prominent friends of the UNCCD to advocate for the convention. Mr. Chair, as the recent assessments of land degradation substantiated that climate, biodiversity, and land are closely interlinked and impact each other, the next biennium will be an opportunity for us to make a leap forward toward raising the profile of sustainable land management as an indicative solution to the 2030 Agenda. We look forward to the guidance from parties on ways and means by which communication could contribute to the advancement in this regard. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
I thank the representative of UNCCD Secretariat for her statement. Are there any delegations wishing to make a statement in connection with the report that was just introduced? I give the floor to India.
Thank you, Chair and distinguished delegates. It's our privilege to give a few comments on the communication plan, especially for the United Nations Decade for Deserts and for the fight against desertification 2010-2020. India appreciates the good work done by the UNCCD Secretariat in developing this communication plan. We agreed to this short communication strategy 2018-2030 for raising the awareness as a key element that plays a central role in addressing desertification, land degradation and drought. India promotes good land stewardship and encourages the role of local individuals and rural communities in adopting sustainable land management practices. India appreciates the achievement of UNCCD on the release of the communication products such as Global Land Outlook, which could be optimized as a strategic communication platform. Every year on the 17th of June, India commemorates World Day to combat desertification, not only at the national level, but also at the state and grassroots levels, with the involvement of multiple stakeholders such as government, non-government, private, civil society, academia, and other ministries and state departments. This year, India celebrated the World Day for the combating desertification on the 17th of June, and we released the logo of the COP14. India suggests that the UNCCD Secretariat may make efforts to compile, document, share, and disseminate updated knowledge of sustainable land management database at the World Overview of Conservation Approaches and Technologies network. Further, success stories may also help to meet the objectives of the convention. We also agreed to the redesigning the Rio Convention Pavilion as a platform for effective communication among various stakeholders. India is also proposing to set up a Global Technical Support Institute for the member countries of the UNCCD for enhancing their capacity building and also for supporting the land degradation neutrality target setting program. Currently the UNCCD is helping out the various countries, but there are still a lot of gaps in capacities which India can step in to fulfill. The proposed institute will help the member countries for supporting their governments for LDN target setting and for displaying leadership in South-South capacity building on land, and we can train other countries in South Asia and also African countries, especially for developing their capacity for leveraging the development of plans, programs, and implementation of these various programs. This institute will help the data analysis, feasibility analysis of the transformative projects, and it will also help member countries for physical, financial, and social capital assessment. This proposed institute will undertake integrated scientific research on land, climate change, and biodiversity. The center will also help decision makers towards land degradation neutrality target setting through integrated modeling of land with other biophysical systems, which is still a novel area. So, thank you, Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of India, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Switzerland.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the Secretariat for the documents and the introduction of the topic. Decision 4 COP13 requested the Secretariat to develop a communication plan that is based on the UNCCD 2018-2030 strategic framework. This new plan, but also the information provided in document COP14/4 have a strong emphasis on the achievement of LDN and drought resilience, as well as on land stewardship. Switzerland agrees that UNCCD's narrative involves some complexity, especially for engagement with the broad society that is not very familiar with DLDD and LDN. In addition, the concept of drought resilience and land stewardship are not easily understandable. In our understanding, land stewardship is the use of land that is environmentally sustainable, economically beneficial, and socially and culturally equitable, achieved through a stakeholder-inclusive process. This concept also includes good land governance. We would like to request the Secretariat to build all of its communication efforts on the UNCCD 2018-2030 strategic framework, such as DLDD, and not only on LDN and drought resilience, and also takes the other objectives of the strategic framework into account, especially Objective 2 on improving the living conditions of affected population. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Switzerland, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank the Secretariat for the work and the introduction provided. When discussing the issue of communication, it is our understanding also talking about efforts of outreach in a way, talking to a public, to a wider public that is often not aware of particular terms, of particular definitions, and likely not be very interested on specific documents, but that will be interested and touched by issues that are easy to realize. So in our understanding, the use of the SDG framework that already is the effort of a large proportion, the most of the United Nations communication strategy, looking for synergies within the SDG framework is an important way forward. And also, with that in mind, the issues that are lived by people in cities, considering most countries have urban populations, and the issue of drought on that is a very important topic in our view. In Brazil, the incidence of drought and severity of some of them has increased. It is there is a large part of the Brazilian population that lives in semi-arid. So the issue of resilience to drought, as was raised also by other delegations, is very important in the sense that the communication about that topic is part of the resilience itself. Information on how to deal with it, the knowledge of sustainable practices that are involved in increasing resilience. So in this regard, the communication, when connected in means to contribute to the work of implementing the convention, offers a way forward. So these are our two main comments: the importance of keeping as most as possible synergy within the SDG framework, in considering topics that are easily communicable and understandable by the wider public that is not our usual clientele, so as to say. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Brazil, and I give the floor back to the UNCCD Secretariat representative to respond to questions and comments of the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for your very useful comments from the government of India, Switzerland, and Brazil. We are really happy that we have the concurrence of the ideas of the communication plan that we have developed, and especially your understanding of the complexity of narrative that involves in the UNCCD's conventions terms, in starting from the world desertification. It's very difficult to communicate with the public. Therefore, your understanding and encouragement that we work on the narratives to make it more people-centered approach, and that we will try to make an effort, and especially along the line with the objective 2, as the representative of the Switzerland mentioned. And also the representative from India, thank you very much again for the understanding of the importance of capacity building and then technical support, that now we have scientifically sound communication is available because thanks to all the recent publications that had assessed the importance of productive land in achieving SDG and climate change biodiversity. So we would continue our efforts of linking and making synergistic implementation and through the Rio Convention's pavilion, and that I think is one issue that we will work on. Thank you.
I thank the representative of UNCCD Secretariat. We have thus concluded the general discussions of Agenda Item 2 and of Item 2C and of Item 2 as a whole. Distinguished delegates, I invite the committee to resume its consideration of Agenda Item 3, entitled Effective Implementation of the Convention of the National, Sub-regional and Regional Levels, in the order to take up Sub-Item B, Promotion and Strengthening of the Relationships, other relevant conventions and international organizations, institutions and agencies. Under this sub-item, the committee has before it a note by the Secretariat contained in document ICCD/COP14/5. I now give the floor to the representative of UNCCD Secretariat, Mr. Sasha Alexander, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Document ICCD/COP14/5 provides a summary of a select number of partnership activities undertaken by the Secretariat and the Global Mechanism, and highlights their efficacy in promoting and strengthening these relationships with the aim of enhancing the implementation of the Convention as requested in Decision 9, COP13. Following this review, the document outlines some recommendations for promoting new relationships and strengthening existing ones. The COP has recognized that making significant progress towards the strategic objectives of the Convention and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development requires strong and effective relationships that can leverage the appropriate synergies with organizations that have overlapping or convergent missions. This includes not only the Rio Conventions and other multilateral environmental agreements, but also those organizations and institutions focused on issues directly relating to sustainable land management, including monitoring and reporting, capacity building, gender equality, drought, sand and dust storms, science policy interface, governance and land rights, rural development, migration and conflict, knowledge and technology transfers, media outreach and communications, and resource mobilization. As regards the partnership activities of the Secretariat and the GM, we would highlight just a few contained in the document. 1. In response to the invitation to the Group on Earth Observations, GEO, to support the efforts of the parties contained in Decision 9, COP13, a GEO-LDN initiative has been established within the GEO work program. This initiative aims to enhance national capacities to access and utilize global, regional, and national data, develop minimum quality standards for the land-based progress indicators, and increase the policy relevance of Earth observation data, tools, and interfaces for the next UNCCD and SDG reporting cycle. 2. Since the adoption of the UNCCD Gender Action Plan, the Secretariat has collaborated with UN Women and other partners to strengthen its capacity to enhance gender mainstreaming in its work, including in situ technical advice and policy guidance on integrating gender issues into UNCCD implementation. 3. Numerous other partnerships and collaborative processes have continued and been enhanced under the umbrella of the Drought Initiative, the work on sand and dust storms, migration and green jobs, as well as the legacy initiatives of the COP presidencies of the Republic of Korea, Turkey, and China. Document ICCD COP14/5 summarizes some of the main activities and outlines some recommendations on future work priorities for promoting and strengthening the relationships among the Rio Conventions and other relevant conventions and international organizations, institutions, and agencies. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the UNCCD Secretariat for his statement. Are there any delegations wishing to make a statement in connection with the report that was just introduced? I give the floor to the distinguished representative of India.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. India appreciates the efforts made by UNCCD Secretariat with the support of global mechanism trying to develop synergies not only with the other two Rio conventions but also with the strategies, programs of other international organizations such as UNEP, FAO, IUCN. Government of India support these initiatives. Recently, the IPCC report has published a special report on climate change, desertification, land degradation, sustainable land management, food security, and greenhouse gas fluxes in terrestrial ecosystem, which is a great achievement to bring out synergy among the common elements of three Rio conventions. Mr. Chairman, similarly, the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services works on deliverable addressing land degradation and land management, which is directly correlate to SDG target 15.3 of achieving land degradation neutrality by 2030. Mr. Chairman, the period of strategic plan for biodiversity 2011 to 2020 with 20 global acquis targets, which was adopted in 2010 under the aegis of Convention on Biological Diversity, and which provides an overarching framework on biodiversity related conventions including UNCCD. Mr. Chairman, India has also highlighted the need to integrate means of implementation including finance, scientific and technical cooperation and technology transfer, and also address all three objectives of the CBD in a balanced manner in post-2020 biodiversity framework. Mr. Chairman, India praises UNCCD efforts to produce a good practice guidance for SDG indicator 15.3.1 in collaboration with Convention on CBD, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the United Nations Environment Programme, and the United Nations Statistics Division to guide the country parties on land-based progress indicator and towards implementation of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Mr. Chairman, in India, we have National Remote Sensing Center, ISRO, which is agreed to participate in developing national database of space-based information required for SDG indicator 15.3.1 and also in the capacity building on geospatial analysis. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of India, and since there are no other parties requesting to take the floor, I now give the floor to UN agency, IGO Ramsar, represented by Ramsar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I am the honor to speak on behalf of the Ramsar Convention of Wetlands at this 14th session of the Conference of the Parties of the UN Convention to combat desertification. Land health and productivity is deeply related to water availability and quality, and thus to the health of wetlands, such as lakes, rivers, marshes, peatlands, and mangroves. Wetlands are the intersection of land and water. Water connects life across sectors, places, and people, as well as geographical and temporal scales, and in most cases, hydrological boundaries and administrative perimeters do not coincide. Wetlands, some of which are vital for people's livelihoods, are declining fast, with 35% losses since 1917, where the data are available according to the Global Wetland Outlook. The conservation, wise use, and restoration of wetlands can play a key role as a natural-based solutions for climate change, adaptation, and disaster risk reductions. Particularly the IPCC Special Report on Land and Climate Change explicitly recognized wetlands, including peatlands, as a critical resource for the multiple ecosystem services and functions, including climate change, adaptation, and mitigation. Ladies and gentlemen, the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands, with its 170 contracting parties, provides a platform for the conservation and wide use of wetlands, and it's a forum for stepping up action to reap the ambition of the SDGs, the global landscape neutrality, the Paris Agreement, and all the sustainable equitable development for all. There are ongoing cooperation between UNCCD and Ramsar Convention. Let me mention a couple of them. The Ramsar Resolution COP12 and 13 on enhancing the Convention's visibility and synergies with other MEAs beyond the Rio Conventions and other international organizations, request the Secretariat to continue working to strengthen collaboration with UN Convention to Desertification. Sustainable work has been done through science and policy cooperation, through the Global Wetland Outlook and the Global Land Degradation. Opportunities to enhance collaboration as the contracting parties have taken decisions on areas of relevance for both conventions. To name a few, the convention is the co-custodian of SDG 661, are preparing inventories and providing data in the national reports. COP13 also adopted a resolution on agriculture, peatland, gender, blue carbon, and climate change. We must identify opportunities at the national level and promote synergies in the work of both of the conventions. At this COP focuses on critical gaps in land management and planning. The links with water and water-related ecosystem needs to be strengthened. The Ramsar Convention looks forward to further collaboration with the UNCCD and contributing to restore land and sustain life. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
I thank the representative of Ramsar, and I now give the floor to the second IGO, ACSAD.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Once again, I would like to remind you that I represent ACSAD, the Arab Center. Perhaps those who have heard UNCCD from the Secretariat or from the global mechanism would not feel it strange that we are present here. There is a strong cooperation with them since the inception of the convention in the 90s of the last century. For example, we cooperated with the convention in the following fields. CN2 in Western Asia was signed by us and the convention. We also signed a regional desert combating agreement. We also provided support for all Arab countries, and we reached an agreement with each and every Arab country between 2008 as well as and 2018. So our cooperation still continues with various regional organizations. We hope that this cooperation will culminate in the implementation of the framework strategy under the convention. We hope that my country's organization will be added to the regional organizations willing to provide support for the implementation of the convention in the Arab countries, i.e. MENA countries. Thank you.
I thank the representative of UNCCD, and I now give the representative of UN agency, UN Forum on Forests the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. It's my pleasure to make this statement on behalf of the Secretariat of the United Nations Forum on Forests. In the context of deliberation here at COP14, the role of forests in combating desertification and land degradation and drought, achieving land degradation neutrality, and sustainable land management was frequently emphasized. The landmark United Nations Strategic Plan for Forests, UNSPF 2030, which was adopted by the General Assembly 2 years ago, also recognized these crucial interlinkages between forest and land. Such emphasis on the positive role of forests in addressing land degradation is not by accident. Over the past 25 years, the rate of net global deforestation has slowed by more than 50%, and this is a credit to efforts that have been made globally to sustainably manage forests, while at the same time engaging in ambitious efforts to restore degraded forests and lands and to plant more trees to meet global demand for forest products and services. If we continue on this path, achieving zero net global deforestation will soon go from an ambition to reality, which will bring us one step closer to the land degradation neutrality targets and the United Nations Strategic Plan for Forests landmark target to expand global forest area by 3% by 2030, an area of 120 million hectares. The UNFF Secretariat has a long-standing relationship with the UNCCD Secretariat through the collaborative partnership on forests, as well as bilaterally. Earlier this year, at the 14th session of the United Nations Forum on Forests in May 2019, the need to enhance coordination and communication in the implementation of the United Nations Strategic Plan for Forests, Paris Agreement, the post-2020 Biodiversity Framework, and land degradation neutrality initiatives was highlighted. As parties to the UNCCD discuss strategies for leveraging the implementation of the Convention and advancing LDN targets and linking LDN targets with SDGs, climate and biodiversity agenda, we hope that the role and potential of forests and forest restoration in this agenda will remain front and center in the decision-making processes concerning land use planning, as well as in the project opportunities and implementation activities. In closing, Mr. Chairman, I would like to take this opportunity to invite the distinguished participant at COP14 to join us tomorrow at lunchtime at our side event in room MET 07, where we will discuss the synergies between the global forest goals of the United Nations Strategic Plan for Forests, land degradation neutrality, and the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the collaboration between the Secretariats of the United Nations Forum on Forests and the UNCCD. I thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the representative of civil society both ends for his statement, and I now give the floor to the Republic of Korea, the representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Chair. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the Republic of Korea. The government of the Republic of Korea plans to strengthen existing partnerships and continue to develop new partnerships in order to enhance the implementation of the Convention as well as the UNCC 2018-2030 strategic framework. In addition, the Korean government, in collaboration with country parties and the UNCCD Secretariat, will continue to develop the Peace Forest Initiative, which aims to restore degraded land and forest, as well as build trust and confidence in fragile, conflict-affected areas. As seen in examples such as environmental cooperation between Ecuador and Peru, collaboration on sustainable land management and LDN in fragile, conflict-affected areas has the potential to enhance LDN implementation and improve living conditions while also promoting peace and confidence building. Especially Korea was able to launch the PFI during the high-level meeting. We are thankful that numerous countries have participated in the launching ceremony and expresses their interest on the supporting the initiative. Moving forward, I hope that PFI can be included as part of the final decision of the COP14, and I would like to ask for your support on it. If the PFI is officially included the final decision of the COP14, it would be served as a great momentum for Korea to further cooperate with partner countries to implement the meaningful initiative. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Republic of Korea, and I now give the floor to the representative of civil society both ends. I apologize, earlier I had stated it's civil society. It was indeed UN Forum on Forests. You have the floor, civil society both ends.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me this time the opportunity to speak. We, the CSOs here at COP14, welcome the considerations from the report. We would like to suggest to strengthen the existing partnership with FAO in order to develop capacities of relevant UNCCD stakeholders on the governance of land, land rights and access to land, with a special focus on the FAO developed tool on implementation of the voluntary 10-year guidelines, gender and youth. Thank you.
I thank the representative of civil society both ends, and I now give the floor to the representative of the Secretariat to respond to the questions and comments from the floor.
Thank you for all the interventions, and only to say that we take note of all the comments and all the positive future outlook that we have, and we will continue to work with our global, regional and sub-regional partners. Thank you.
Thank the representative of UNCCD Secretariat for his comments. Distinguished delegates, we have just concluded the general discussions on sub-item 3B, and I now invite the committee to begin its consideration of agenda item 7, entitled Procedural Matters, sub-item A, participation and involvement of civil society organizations in meetings and processes of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. Under this sub-item, the committee has before it the following document: ICCD/COP14/13. I now give the floor to the representative of UNCCD Secretariat, Mr. Marcus Monteiro, to make an introductory statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, distinguished delegates. By its decision 5 COP13, the Conference of the Parties requested the Secretariat to address a number of issues relevant to the involvement of the civil society organizations in the process of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. The COP requested the Executive Secretary to facilitate the renewal of the membership to the Civil Society Organization Panel. It also requested, in collaboration with the panel, to take the necessary measures to implement the recommendations of the independent evaluation on the effectiveness of the UNCCD support for CSO participation. By the same decision, the COP requested the Executive Secretary to report at its 14th session on the implementation of this decision, including on the report of the CSO panel on the implementation of its tasks. Following this request, the Secretariat produced the document ICCD/COP14/13 entitled Participation and Involvement of Civil Society Organizations in Meetings and Processes of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. This document contains the report of the Executive Secretary and the report of the CSO panel on the measures undertaken by the Secretariat to implement the above-mentioned decision, and provides recommendations for consideration at COP14. I thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
I thank the representative of UNCCD Secretariat for his statement. It is my understanding that the outcomes of the discussions on this agenda sub-item will be integrated into the Civil Society Declaration, on which the committee will take action at the time of adoption of its draft proposals. Also, the outcomes of the discussions held during the Youth Forum from 6 to 7 September will be integrated in the Youth Forum Declaration, on which the committee will take action at the time of adoption of its draft proposal. I now give the floor to the representative of Civil Society Organization, Ms. Jai Jai Lu, Chair of the UNCCD CSO panel, to introduce the report submitted under this sub-item.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. Distinguished guests, good afternoon. The UNCCD Civil Society Organization Panel, CSO panel, was established in 2009 by the Conference of Parties through its decision 5/COP9. The CSO panel has 5 members who represent the 5 UN regions. The current panel was elected in January 2018 by the CSOs accredited to the UNCCD. The 5 members are Jektuba Azelka from Togo, Jia Luo from China, Octavia Prazo-Pardo from Argentina, Natalie Van Haren from the Netherlands, and Valentin from Moldova. CSO panel agreed on modus operandi and prepared its program of work for 2018 and 2019 that will enable it to fulfill its mandate at this first meeting in Delhi in February 2018. Together with the formal panel, the new panel developed CSO panel guiding principles, operational rules, and procedures to improve the functioning of the panel. The CSO panel organized monthly online meetings. The CS panel members have been in contact with their constituency through face-to-face conversations and emails in order to ensure that the voice of civil society is reflected in the CSO panel discussions. The panel members actively advocate SDG 15.3, the conventions on the country and regional level, to engage different stakeholders by organizing or participating conferences like Global Land Forum 2018 in Indonesia, Africa Climate Week 2019 in Ghana, Silk Road Eco Restoration Forum in China, and so on. The number of CSO accredited with the UNCCD has increased by 100. organizations. The panel facilitated the nomination and election of a new CSO observer to SPI, who would act as alternate to be and as the successor of the current CSO observer. The panel also selected one of its members to participate in the LDN Fund Strategic Board. At CRIC 17 held in Guyana this January, the CSO panel facilitated a discussion with attending CSOs, which resulted in 5 CSO priorities that were finally included as recommendations to COP14. One of priorities, land tenure security, is one of the COP official agenda for the first time. Prior to the COP14, the panel worked with CARI and the Secretariat and SPON to organize Decisive Action 2019 International Civil Society Summit in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso this June, with around 400 participants from 40 countries. The 5 CSO priorities were reaffirmed during testifications in the end. A declaration incorporating the contributions and recommendations resulting from 3 days' work was validated at the end of the summit. Here in Delhi, the CSO panel has organized and facilitated over 100 CSO representatives here in Delhi. The 5 CSO priorities were fine-tuned to the UNCCD agenda. The priorities of the CSOs for the COP are recognition by the policymakers, financial institutions, and others that community-led initiatives are contributing to LDN. Land tenure security of communities in general, that of women, young people, and vulnerable groups especially must be secured through a UNCCD COP14 decision on implementation of FAO's voluntary tenure guidelines. Participation of civil society, especially women's and youth groups, throughout decision-making process regarding LDN targets and national drought plans is crucial to guarantee sustainability. Finance must be accessible and appropriate for civil society organizations supporting community, especially women and young people, in achieving LDN or monitoring the implementation of LDN projects. Transform our society as to achieve greater sustainability and equity, especially gender equity. Thank you very much for your attention.
I thank the representative of civil society organizations for our statement. Are there any delegations wishing to make a statement in connection with the report that was just introduced? I see none. We have just concluded the general discussion. Oh, sorry. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. India appreciates and encourages the participation and involvement of civil society organizations in processes of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. Mr. Chair, India encouraged the suggestions of NGO CSOs for innovative ideas for better implementation of the objective of the UNCCD, subject to availability of financial and technical resources, which are in line with the national circumstances. The meaningful engagement of CSOs or NGOs in the implementation of the objective of UNCCD is very crucial, especially when we have challenges of drought, land degradation and desertification. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the representative of India. Since there are no other delegation wishing to speak, I give the floor to the representative of the Secretariat and civil society organizations to respond.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The Secretariat takes notes of the contribution and the comments provided by the Government of India, and it will be included in the draft decision. Thank you so much.
We have just concluded the general discussion of sub-item 7A. Distinguished delegates, I now invite the committee to begin its consideration of agenda item 7, sub-item B, entitled Participation and Involvement of the Private Sector in meetings and processes of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification and the business engagement strategy, for which you have before you a note by the Secretariat in document ICCD/COP14/14. I give the floor to the representative of the UNCCD Secretariat, Mr. Marcos Monteiro, to introduce the report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Decisions 5 COP11, 6 COP12, 6 COP13 set the basis for the Secretariat and the global mechanism to promote the involvement of business and industry entities in meetings and processes of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. The Secretariat developed a business engagement strategy outlining the objectives, modalities and conditions of UNCCD partnership with business and private entities. At the last session of the COP, parties encouraged the Secretariat and the GM to continue engaging with the private sector within the framework established by the business engagement strategy and to report back to COP14. Following this request, the Secretariat produced the document ICCD/COP14/14, entitled Participation and Involvement of the Private Sector in Meetings and Processes of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification and the Business Engagement Strategy. This document contains the report of the Executive Secretary on the measures taken by the Secretariat to implement the decision and provides recommendations for consideration at COP14. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
I thank the representative of the Secretariat for his statement. It is my understanding that the outcomes of the discussion on this agenda sub-item will be integrated in the Sustainable Land Management Business Forum declaration, on which the committee will also take action at the time of the adoption of its draft proposals. Are there any delegations wishing to make a statement in connection with the report that was just introduced? Distinguished delegate from India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We as a nation support any initiative taken by UNCCD for active participation of private sector in meetings and processes. This would lead to availability of funds from partnerships of private sector in combating desertification. The country supports the initiative and we agree to any innovative suggestions of private sectors for implementation of this convention, subject to resource mobilization in accordance with national circumstances of the country party. Thank you so much.
I thank the distinguished representative of India, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We welcome this report produced by the Secretariat, and we think this effort in increasing private sector participation should be intensified. We see still a great room of potential for increasing that participation and for having a wider understanding of the topics here in discussion at UNCCD, connecting also to the previous discussion of communication. The private sector can provide great stimulus in increasing the sustainability of agricultural practices and thereby controlling land degradation, ensuring that agricultural production is done in a sustainable way is in the interest of the private sector, of agricultural producers. So also in the perspective of harnessing the potential of renewable energy generation for accelerating the implementation of UNCCD, the engagement of the private sector will become even more relevant, considering that in most national contexts, there is a greater push, or there is already a consolidated regulatory framework that calls for the leadership of private investment in energy generation. So as we are moving into that direction of recognizing the potential of different renewable energy modalities contributing to the efforts under the UNCCD, it is important that that gets translated into the private sector and that be understood not only as getting donations or support for implementation of programs, but also of getting them into helping design and involved in leading projects that by themselves will have co-benefits for the implementation of this convention. In Brazil, one example that I would like to point out is the ABC program, Low Carbon Agricultural Program, and it is done in partnership with agricultural producers by providing advice in a series of different elements in this program geared to different areas of agriculture and different ecosystems in Brazil that entails greater access to agricultural techniques and awareness on means to produce using fewer fertilizers in a way that is agreeable with tropical lands, which is the case in Brazil, how to adapt different kinds of seeds to different areas. So it's a whole range of possibilities that the engagement with the private sector can provide, and we would, in this regard, emphasize the need to have this open mind of when we are meaning private sector, that this is not just large multinational corporations with big philanthropy funds to be provided. This also means engaging innovative companies in renewable energy. This involves engaging associations and different representatives of medium and small scale agricultural producers in all countries. Again, in this regard, it's very important topic for a greater mainstreaming of UNCCD, and also for realizing this great objective, which is greater synergy among the conventions. It is in the real life implementation of livelihoods and business practices that the greater benefits for such synergies can be achieved. When the investments are happening, is the opportunity to have that going. So we're very supportive of this. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Brazil. And I now give the floor to the representative of civil society to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me again the opportunity to speak. We the CSOs here at COP14 welcome the idea that business and private sector should be more engaged within the combat of desertification and especially halting land degradation. As the UNCCD guides national policy frameworks, we would like to really stress that due diligence and transparency is of utmost importance when engaging with private sector, especially about participation as observer in working groups, donations, and other possible support by the private sector. Thank you.
I thank the representative of civil society for our comments, and I give the floor to the representative of the Secretariat to respond to the questions and comments from the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much to the representatives of Brazil for the comments that have been provided today. It's very very good comments that we are going to be including also in the draft decision that is going to be discussed also very soon. And we take note also of the comments provided by the civil society organizations on the issue of the involvement of the private sector. Thank you so much.
I thank the representative of the UNCCD Secretariat for his response. We have just concluded the general discussions of sub-item 7B. Distinguished delegates, I now invite the committee to begin its consideration of agenda item 7, sub-item C, entitled Program of Work for the 15th session of the Conference of the Parties. Delegations will recall that at this first meeting on 3rd September, the committee had allocated the program of work for the 15th session of the Conference of the Parties, including the dates and venues of the session, to Contact Group 2 on other matters. In this regard, I urge the Contact Group to begin its deliberations and conclude them in a timely manner in order to allow committee to act on these issues at its final plenary meeting. Are there any delegations wishing to make a statement under this sub-item? We have none. We have just concluded the general discussions on sub-item 7C and item 7 as a whole. Distinguished delegates, we have thus concluded our consideration of the items on this afternoon's agenda. The committee will reconvene tomorrow at a time to be stated. Please pay attention to the notice boards around the conference hall. I give the floor now to the Secretariat for any announcements that they may have. Okay. There being none, the meeting is now adjourned. Oh, sorry, one.
Dear delegates, we have received a request once again from Ministry of Environment and Forest, host of this COP14, that today there will be a reception in hall number 7 at 6 p.m. for all delegates. Please make it convenient to attend the reception. This reception is for all delegates attending COP14 at 6 p.m. hall number 7. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Executive Secretary, Deputy Executive Secretary. This meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.